Well, welcome and good morning to all of you on the West Coast. My name is Jay Williams and I'm a professor at Virginia Tech here in Blacksburg, Virginia. I also operate the website Science of Soccer Online that is dedicated to translating research into practical applications for coaches, players, and parents. I'd also like to welcome Robin Russell from London. Robin is the CEO of SportsPath, the world's largest provider of online soccer education. He's also a consultant for the UEFA's grassroots football program. We're having a little bit of technical difficulty getting Robin joined in, but hopefully that'll get resolved here in a bit. I'd also like to thank the CalSouth Coaches Association for hosting this event and for giving us a chance to talk with you today. Now, what we'd like to talk about today is preparation and recovery and refueling for multi-match weekends and how diet can be used to help improve your team's performance, especially in times of a congested calendar. Now, before we begin, a couple of things. One is we will be taking questions by using our Twitter feed, and that's through the Science of Soccer Online or the Twitter at SCI/SCR Online. So feel free to post comments and questions there, and we'd be happy to address those. This webinar will also be archived through the YouTube link that was provided by the CalSouth website. So if you have coaches, acquaintances, parents, players that would like to watch it and see what we had to say, you can direct them to that link, and we'll also be posting in a number of other places as well. So they can certainly watch that offline later on. So again, feel free to share that with anybody that would be interested. Now, what we want to talk about today is performance, and in terms of performance, it's all about energy and maintaining energy stores and having enough energy to complete a 90-minute match. For example, in the US-Belgium match earlier this week, the two teams played a little over 129 minutes. Midfielder Michael Bradley covered almost 10.5 miles during that match. He also performed 65 sprints of 10 yards or greater, probably countless numbers of stops, starts, jumps, changes in directions. The best estimate is that during the course of that match, he expended about 2,000 to 2,500 calories. Now, what this does, this raises two questions or two concepts. First of all, in order to complete a match such as that, the energy tank has to be full before kickoff. The second is because the U.S. played so many matches in such a short period of time, a player like Michael Bradley, his energy tank needs to be refilled as quickly as possible afterwards. Now, without an adequate energy supply, what happens is players experience fatigue during the end of a match. So in this graph, what's shown is the total distance players cover, along with the distance they cover during sprints and high-intensity activity over the course of a match. So what you can see is the distance they cover decreases during the first period towards the halftime mark. It also decreases during the second period. So at the end of a match, players are covering about 12% less distance. They're also covering about 20% less distance in sprinting and high-intensity activities. This also holds true for a lot of technical skills such as passing ability, shots on goal, touches, those sorts of things. Now, what we want to do is avoid the bad result. One thing we've known for years about soccer is goals scored increases as the match progresses, so more goals are scored at the end of the match. Players fatigue, especially the defenders. This creates chances for the offensive team, and it also increases the number of incidents. As players get fatigued, they tend to make sloppy tackles, commit more fouls, and yellow cards, those sorts of things. So what we want to do is have enough energy in the tank before the match starts to get them through those 90 minutes, or in the case of the U.S., get them through almost 130 minutes so that they don't fatigue, they don't give up that late goal, they don't commit that late foul that's going to put their team in jeopardy. Now, one of the keys to energy is understanding where energy comes from. So in order to understand how diet and energy are linked together with performance, we need to think a little bit about where energy comes from. The vast majority of the energy used during a match comes from carbohydrates, and these are carbohydrates that are stored in the body, stored either as glucose in the blood or blood sugar, or primarily as glycogen that's stored inside the muscle. Now, glycogen is really a big molecule that's made up of smaller glucose molecules. So when we exercise, the muscle takes glucose out of the blood. It also breaks down the muscle glycogen to provide the energy needed for muscle contractions. During recovery or during rest, muscles still take up glucose, and then they convert that and store it into glycogen. So instead of breaking it down, it builds the glycogen stores up. Now, a couple of things we do know about muscle glycogen is the more glycogen that's in the muscle before the start of the match, the more the players can compete at a higher intensity. We also know that glycogen at the beginning of a match is dependent on the diet. The more carbohydrates that are taken in before the start of a match, the days leading up to the match, the greater the glycogen stores are going to be, and consequently, the better the players are going to be able to play, again, especially towards the end of the match. So the key to this diet idea affecting muscle glycogen and then affecting muscle performance is eating what we consider a solid diet. And that's a diet that tends to be high in carbohydrates and low in fats. For example, most players, what we would recommend for them to eat is about 65 to 70% of their total calories in carbohydrates. We'd like them to eat about 20 to 25% of that as fats. Players do need some fats, but we want to limit that to about 20 to 25%, and the remaining 10% of that is going to be in protein. So for some practical examples, the types of foods that we would recommend for a player leading up to the start of a match, or again for his general diet, is pastas, rice, breads. We'd like them to eat as many fresh fruits and vegetables as possible. For protein, we'd like them to focus on lean meats, things like turkey and chicken. And we'd also like them to drink low-fat milk, fruit juices, water is fine as a part of their meal. We'd like them to avoid anything that's fried or fatty, pastries that are also tend to be fried and covered with what we call simple sugars, canned fruits because of their high sugar content, sodas, again, a lot of sugar, butter and sauces contain a lot of fat, so those again are items that we'd like to avoid. Now, this solid diet becomes very critical when teams are asked to play multiple matches in a very short period of time. Again, going back to the World Cup, the U.S. played Portugal on a Sunday. They then had to travel and play Germany on a Thursday, so they had 3 days to recover. This coming fall, the Virginia Tech women's team is going to play on a Thursday night at the University of Miami. 2 days later on Sunday, they'll play at Florida State. So again, 3 days later, so they have 2 days to recover, again, with some travel involved. This past Memorial Day weekend, our local team, the New River United team, played a couple of matches in our tournament. They played their first match at 9 o'clock on a Saturday, and then again at 2 o'clock on that same Saturday. So again, they've got a 4-hour window there to recover. So what happens is during these first matches, these players are going to deplete their energy stores. They're going to deplete their muscle glycogen. They've got a very short period of time to recover that glycogen, to replenish those energy stores before they take on their next match. So it becomes very important to eat right both before and after a match. Now, one of the acronyms we've been using to try and emphasize this is the acronym PITCH. And what this stands for is the P refers to preferences. We like to have players eat foods that they prefer, foods that they like. We want them to avoid inappropriate foods, again, fats and simple sugars, things like that. Timing of that diet is also important in terms of the pre-match meal, 2 to 4 hours before kickoff. In terms of recovery, we want them to focus on a 45 to 60-minute window after the match. The C stands for carbohydrates. Again, loading up on carbohydrates, specifically complex carbohydrates, the rice, pastas, vegetables, and so forth. And the last is hydration, which is the H in the acronym, is to drink plenty of fluids, especially at times during the summer when matches are played in the heat. We want players to be well hydrated before and then rehydrate after. So let's look at a couple of practical situations here and how you might handle a congested calendar, particularly a youth tournament, for example, how we can help players eat right and eat at the correct time. So before the match, let's say, for example, a team has an 8 o'clock start time in the morning or 9 o'clock. In order to eat 2 to 3 hours before the match, this means the players are going to have to eat at about 6 o'clock, maybe 6:30 in the morning. We have a small time period from the time they're going to eat until they play, so we want them to eat light. We do want them to eat. Some players tend to skip breakfast for these 8 o'clock games. We want them to eat light. They will probably take in less protein, maybe than normal, but we want what they eat to be very high in carbohydrates. So things like oatmeal, fruits, bagels, and so forth are high in carbohydrate, are limited in the amount of fat that they have, and again have a little bit of protein, but not a lot. As far as beverages, fluids, fruit juices are great, water is good, and so forth. Avoid fats, anything that's fried, bacon, anything that's covered in a sauce. We certainly want them to avoid. Milk with the short window may be okay, but some players may not tolerate a lot of milk 2 hours before the match. So fruit juices may be the better choice. Now, if the team's going to start later on in the day, let's say 2 o'clock, or let's say we're looking at a 7 o'clock kickoff time,
fruit juices are great.
we're going to eat. We're probably going to eat lunch or maybe brunch or something a little later in the afternoon at 11 o'clock or maybe 4 p.m. Again, eating fairly light, but this case, since there's a little more time in between the pregame meal and the start of the match, we can have them eat a little more protein. So again, high carbohydrates, probably things like lean meat sandwiches, turkey sandwiches, and so forth, with lettuce, tomato, vegetables on it. Also pasta, rice dishes with lean meat, grilled chicken, things like that would certainly be good for them to eat at that time. And again, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables should always be included with a pre-meat meal. Again, fluids, fruit juices, water, things like that. Again, avoiding fats, avoiding things that are covered in creamy sauces, avoiding things that are fried. In terms of sandwiches, a little mayonnaise is good. A lot is probably not the best option. What we want in both of these cases, again, is high carbohydrates. We want the players to feel full and feel satisfied, but we don't want them to feel bloated. So eat until they're full, but not feel bloated. But again, focus on the high carbohydrate items that they can find. As we approach kickoff, so we're at the field, we have the players warming up. What we would like for them to do is have a pre-match snack or maybe a pre-match beverage. In this case, 15-20 minutes before kickoff, during the warm-up, have them drink. This can be done throughout the warm-up, a sports drink because it's got some carbohydrates in it. It has the fluids that they need to avoid dehydration. Pieces of an energy bar may be fine. Some companies now are making gels and gummies and chews that are high in carbohydrate. These things are fairly easy to digest and are great snacks to have shortly before kickoff to try and sort of top off their carbohydrate stores, and also to, again, the sports drinks to provide the hydration. There are a few things we can do during the match, particularly with the youth teams, high school and college players. With the substitution rules, we can have them drink during the match when they come off the field. We can certainly have all the players drinking at halftime. So again, at halftime, hydration, sports drink, particularly players, the older players, they're going to be playing a 90-minute match. So after a 45-minute shift, we would like them to drink. And again, a sports drink will also provide the carbohydrates that they need. We can also at this time give them a bit of a snack. Again, pieces of an energy bar, Again, some of the chews, the gels, the gummies, again, to get a little bit of carbohydrate in their system, and certainly get the fluids in their system before the next period. One key is not too much. We don't want to have them eat too much that they feel bloated, they get a stomach ache, they don't feel good, that sort of thing. So limit a little bit what they eat, but certainly let them have hydration in terms of a sports drink or water, something like that. After the match, this is one of the periods where players typically fail to take advantage of the sports nutrition and diet concepts. After the match, players generally are thinking about, they're excited after they won, they're dejected if they lost, they're listening to you as coaches talk about the game, they're not thinking about the next match. This is a critical time in terms of energy stores for players to take in foods, to take in carbohydrates, to get them ready for the next match, whether that match is tomorrow or if that match is later in the day. The reason is we have a 45 to 60-minute window at which we can maximize energy replenishment. Once the match is over, muscles are still taking up glucose from the blood as if we were exercising. Because we're not exercising, the muscles take up that glucose and then they store it as glycogen. So if we can provide additional glucose to the muscle through the diet, then the muscle will take up more and store more as glycogen. Now, this is sort of what's shown here in this graph. So we play the first match, and what happens is our muscle glycogen levels, our energy stores, decrease. Now, at the end of the match, if we sort of let the players go, and they don't eat or really drink anything with any kind of carbohydrate in it, what happens is muscle glycogen restoration is delayed until they're off eating dinner, eating lunch, or whatever it might be. If we can give them something during that 45 to 60-minute window, we can jumpstart that glycogen recovery. We can jumpstart the replenish of muscle glycogen and get them ready for the next match. So that what happens after the course of, say, 24 hours, glycogen does recover if we miss that window, but it doesn't recover as quickly and it doesn't recover as effectively as it does if we give them some sort of a snack immediately after the match. So again, this 45 to 60-minute window is one of those periods that many players miss because they don't have things to eat or don't have things to drink while they're at the game. Now, so what are we really talking about in terms of after this match? What should we have them eat? Again, carbohydrates, and we know now that a little bit of protein helps that glycogen recovery process. So we're looking at about 1 gram to 1.5 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight. So now, for example, a 70-kilogram player, which is about 154 pounds, that works out to about 70 to 100 grams of carbohydrates, along with about 2 to 10 grams of protein. Because they typically may have played a match in the heat, we're going to ask them to drink about 20 to 30 ounces of fluid, so about 1/2 liter to maybe 1 liter of fluid over the next hour. And again, sports drinks are good for that. We would like them to avoid anything that's high in fat. Again, we want to give the players a lot of carbohydrates right after the match. Now, 70 to 100 grams of carbohydrates, what does that sort of work out to in terms of specific foods? This is a little short list of some things that we would consider solid recovery choices and those that we would consider weak. So, for example, a 20-ounce sports drink is about 40 carbohydrates. That's about half of what the player needs during that hour after the match. Bagels, bananas, low-fat chocolate milk, we'll come back to that in a second. Granola bars provide another 20 to 30 to 40 grams of carbohydrates. So a sports drink and a banana is about 70 grams of carbohydrates. So we're close to what those players would need. Bagels, bananas, granola bars also have a few grams of protein. Again, we know that that helps the glycogen recovery process. The other thing is all of these are very, very low in fat. Again, fat can inhibit this process, so we want them to avoid the fat. Now, on the other hand, what we often see players do, especially the younger players, potato chips, snack cakes, cookies, these have carbohydrates, not as many as some of the other choices, They also typically have a lot of fat. For example, potato chips are more fat than they are carbohydrates. Cookies and snack cakes the same. Protein and recovery shakes, these are advertised as recovery beverages. However, these shakes, especially if they're labeled a protein shake or a protein bar, tend to be high in protein, fairly low in carbohydrates. So we want to avoid those types of things because that's not the ratio we want. We want the high carbohydrate items with very, very little fat and a small amount of protein. Again, 45 to 60 minutes after that match. Now, one item that has become quite popular in the last few years is the use of low-fat chocolate milk as a recovery drink. Now, low-fat chocolate milk, the advantage to that is it's very high in carbohydrates. It also has a little bit of protein, and it has very low fat, especially if it's low-fat chocolate milk. The other advantage to that is that low-fat chocolate milk also has a number of vitamins, vitamin A and D. It also has several minerals and electrolytes, sodium, potassium, and calcium. And what we found sort of on the research side of things is that after a heavy bout of exercise, drinking low-fat chocolate milk can help with glycogen stores, the replenishment of glycogen stores, as well, if not a little bit better, than some of the other commercial products, sports drinks, and those sorts of things. So chocolate milk is difficult for players to drink if it's a hot, humid day. But nevertheless, on most days, a cold container of chocolate milk may be just the thing to help them with their recovery. So as coaches, one of the things we can do is emphasize this recovery immediately after the match. Drinking a sports drink, something like low-fat chocolate milk. Also eating a snack, a bagel, energy bar, fruit, something like that that's going to have carbohydrates along with a little protein in it. Then later on in the day, or that evening, to follow that up with a high carbohydrate meal. Again, pastas with lean meats, chicken, grilled chicken, things like that. And then even a snack later on in the evening. Something like a fruit smoothie might be a nice way to kind of end the day and help top off those muscle glycogen levels. Continue drinking throughout the evening, and again, for to help with the rehydration process. Now, the last piece of this puzzle, the last thing that's important, is the idea of is the concept of hydration. Hydration is really the one part of the nutrition puzzle that is absolutely essential. We can have players play with low muscle glycogen. They run out of energy. They get tired. They don't play very well. But players who run out of fluids, who get dehydrated, not only is performance affected, but they can also suffer some serious health effects and really put themselves in a dangerous situation. Now, the way we look at hydration, the way we look at dehydration specifically, is how much weight a player loses, let's say, during a match. And that if they lose about 2 to 3% of their body weight during the match, that's going to be through fluids that are being lost through sweat, performance starts to be affected. We see decision-making, effort, technical skills start to decline. If they lose between 3 and 6% of their body weight, we start to see health effects, headaches, chills, those sorts of things. At that point, we need to stop players. We need to stop them, move them to a cool place, and have them drink something cool. If they lose 6 to 9% of their body weight, we're looking at probably some medical emergencies, heat stroke, heat illness, and those sorts of things. So it's very important for players to be well hydrated before the match and to hydrate during and especially after the match as part of that recovery process. So again, hydrate before the match. Again, one of the things I tried to emphasize throughout is to drink plenty of fluids during the match, before the match with each meal, and to drink fluids after the match. After the match, what we would like for players to do is replace about 1.5 times the amount of body weight that they've lost. So if they've lost about 1 kilogram or about 2 pounds, what we're going to have them do is replace about 1.5 liters of that fluid, or about 1.5 quarts of fluid. Now, as an example that's shown in this slide is two 1-liter bottles. So if a player's losing 2 pounds during a match, we'll need them to drink about 1.5 bottles of fluid. We want them to start drinking soon after the match. We want them to continue that and spread that over the next 24 hours to continue drinking. Sports drinks, in this case, are a very good source of fluid as well as carbohydrates. In fact, many sports drinks are designed to promote rapid absorption of fluids, along with supplying the body with carbohydrates to replenish muscle glycogen. We want them to avoid drinks that have caffeine in them, so certainly energy drinks. The caffeine is a diuretic, so it actually promotes fluid loss, so we want them to avoid that. And again, over the course of 24 hours, drink as much generally and as often as they can. So diet is the real key to energy. What we see with the diet is that as players eat better, they eat higher carbohydrates, they take carbohydrates into their system, that carbohydrate gets stored as glycogen within the muscle, and then that glycogen then can be used with energy. So the quicker and the better we replace muscle glycogen after a match, the more energy we're going to have for the next match. Again, this is very important for kids who are playing 2 matches in a day, a 9 o'clock match and a 2 o'clock match. It's important to get something in their system and start that recovery process as quickly as we can. Even the professionals who may be playing matches with only a few days in between, to help start that glycogen recovery process within that 60-minute window, so that they can prepare for the next day, or maybe 2-3 days later on when that second match is going to be played. Now, as far as coaches, what can we do to help this? One is to communicate with the players, to continue to have a conversation with them whenever you can, to emphasize a solid diet, one that's high in carbohydrates, high in fresh fruits and vegetables, high in lean proteins, low in fats. Have them limit the fats, discourage snack foods, discourage potato chips, discourage items like that, especially in the days leading up to a congested schedule, leading up to a weekend tournament. Emphasize the need to prepare early, to eat high carbohydrate foods, and then certainly throughout the event. Remind them after the match that they need to eat, they need to drink, and they need to think about the next day, even though, again, they're excited about a win, they're dejected about a loss, or they're ready to go do something with their friends. Remind them how important that recovery diet is. It's also important to communicate with the parents. If you're teaching a club team, one of the things we found is that players generally know more about their diet than moms and dads do. So communicate with the players, communicate with the parents to emphasize these sorts of diet habits. Now, the last thing I want to finish up with is the question is, does this work? You know, I get this question all the time. Does it really matter what we have players eat, or do they just need to get calories? And the answer is yes, it does matter what they eat, and that does affect performance. This is a study that came out a year ago, and it's really interesting. What they did is they took 2 teams, and in the days leading up to the match, they had them eat different diets. So, for example, they played 2 matches. So, for example, before the first match, Team A ate a diet that was very, very high in carbohydrates. Team B ate a diet that was fairly low in carbohydrates. So they played their match. A week later, they played a second match, but what they did is the teams switched their diets, so that Team B then ate the high carbohydrate diet, and Team A ate the low carbohydrate diet. Well, what happens, you can kind of see this on the graph, is what happens is when the teams ate the high carbohydrate diet, they did more running during the match. In fact, they covered, you know, anywhere but from 17 to 34% more distance sprinting and running at high speeds. So they had more energy, they covered more distance. If we look at the aggregate score, when the team that ate the high carbohydrate diet outscored the team that ate the low carbohydrate diet with an aggregate of 5-2. So when a team eats a high carbohydrate diet, they can run, cover more distance, particularly at the end of a match. And in the case of this study, they actually outscored their opponent. So the answer is, does this really work? Does diet really affect performance? The answer is yes, absolutely. It can affect performance, and it can lead to influence the match outcome. And I can't imagine Michael Bradley competing and doing what he did against Belgium while eating a diet that was high in fat, junk food, those sorts of things. So certainly diet can help players play better. Now, before answering a couple of questions, I do want to point out or mention that we do have some other resources. If if you'd like to read a little bit more about diet, nutrition, and how it affects performance, my website, The Science of Soccer Online, is here. It's www.scienceofsocceronline, all one word, .com. And again, what I try to do is periodically post little articles on some of the science that's being done in the world of soccer and how that can affect performance, anywhere from injury prevention to fitness to diet, and those sorts of things. Robin operates his blog called the Sports Path e-learning blog that has a number of resources for coaches who want to communicate with players, enhance their learning experience by using the internet. We also offer a course called the Soccer Diet, the simplest way to improve your team's performance. Members of the Southern Cal Coaches Association do receive a discount on that course. We're offering that at a discounted rate, and you can see the links are going to be on their website. And certainly we can do if you're interested in enrolling that course. We'd love to have you enroll. And then I also have a book that you can purchase called The Science Behind Soccer Nutrition, and that can be found through Amazon. I also have links to the book as well as the course on my website. So certainly can go to those different sites and enjoy some of those resources in terms of learning a little bit more about coaching, a little bit more about diet and training. Now, again, I thank everyone for joining you. We do have a couple of questions. I got a couple through email and so forth, and so I will be happy to answer those questions. If you have other questions, feel free to put them on the Twitter site, and I will try to get to those. If I can't get to them today, I will try to answer them on Twitter for you. And you're certainly welcome to contact me through the website if you want to send me an email or something. One of the questions I did get is it okay for players to stray from a solid diet every now and then? And that's a good question. Do we have to constantly be on players to eat correctly? There was a great interview that was just posted with the U.S. men's national team nutritionist Danielle Lafata, and I hope I pronounced her name right. And she operates by what is called the 80-20 rule. And what she likes to see is players eat 80% of their meals and snacks coming from something that is good, healthy, solid foods, high in carbohydrate, low in fat. Then gives them a little bit of leeway on the other 20%. Some things that they enjoy eating, some things that are good, maybe not the best, but certainly good for them. But let them do that about 20% of the time. So give them a little bit of leeway in their diet. That's the P in that acronym of PITCH, is preference, giving players a little more preference in what they can eat. A second question is, what about protein? How much protein does a player need to eat? Do they need to use protein powders and protein supplements? The answer to that is players need about 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Now, as it turns out, even in growing players, if they're eating a solid diet that has lean meats, vegetables, and so forth in that diet, milks, cheeses, those sorts of things, they're generally going to get enough protein to meet that 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight. So a young player, even a growing player, really doesn't need to invest in protein powders, protein shakes, those sorts of things. They should get plenty of that before the match. They should get plenty of that through their normal diet. Next, a question came in is about caffeine. One of the things I did a few months ago was put an article on the NSCAA website on caffeine and using caffeine as a supplement. And I got actually a few questions about that, and they were very good questions. Should players really take caffeine? From the research standpoint, from the scientist standpoint, we found that caffeine does help performance. That a little bit of caffeine before an activity that involves skill and effort can actually improve performance. Now, that said, from a health perspective and from a parent who had 2 sons playing soccer, we need to take that with a grain of salt. Providing young players with caffeine supplements is probably not a good idea and is really not recommended by many in the sport nutrition world. Kids tend to overdo it. Kids tend to respond differently to caffeine than do adults. And there's been a few reports in the news lately of teenagers taking caffeine and having some health problems in that regard. So again, on one hand, caffeine does seem to help, but on the other, it's probably not something that we want to encourage young players to begin using our caffeine supplements. Yep. Now, one question that I do get regularly is what about fast food establishments? Can we find good, healthy selections at fast food? Tournaments, especially when players are playing 2 games in a single day, parents are left with going to fast food places to grab lunch before the second match. And the answer to that is yes, you can find good items at fast food restaurants if you look. Even McDonald's has grilled chicken sandwiches with lettuce and tomato. Chick-fil-A, some of these other places have grilled chicken items. If you order these items, try to cut back on the condiments, the mayonnaise, things like that. Certainly order them if you can with fruit as opposed to French fries, those sorts of things. A lot of sandwich shops have sub sandwiches that can be ordered, lean meat sandwiches, Subway, Panera here on the East Coast. You can get turkey sandwiches. Again, try to limit the condiments, but they have lettuce, tomato, those sorts of things. And are certainly are very good items to eat at lunch that are fast food items. The key is avoiding the traditional chicken nuggets and French fries. The young kids love that, but boy, one of the worst things they can eat between matches is an order of chicken nuggets and fries, and then wonder why they can't play very well that afternoon. It's because of the fat. It's because of the high fat content and those different items. Along those same lines, I get asked quite often is some parents like to bring items to the tournament. They like to pack their own food. So what kind of things should they bring? If I'm a parent and I have a child that's going to play a morning match and then an afternoon match, and I don't want to fight standing in line at a fast food restaurant, then what I can do is bring food for the players. Water and sports drinks are certainly a must. For hydration and a little bit of carbohydrates. Pack fresh fruits and vegetables, bananas, apples, oranges, those sorts of things are great for the players to eat. One thing we've learned is if you cut those up beforehand, players will eat them more often. For example, if a banana is chopped, if an apple is peeled or sliced, if a pineapple, things like that are already cut, the players will tend to eat them rather than peel the orange themselves. You can also bring turkey and other lean meat sandwiches with lettuce and tomato, packed very nicely. You can bring the meat with you in a cooler. They can make their own sandwiches. Peanut butter and jelly is also very good as well. Peanut butter, if there's a short window between matches, the protein fat may be a little bit more than they need, but certainly if it's just a lunch between a match at, say, 9 o'clock and a match at 3 o'clock, peanut butter and jelly is a great recovery item. And then also snacks, things like pretzels, dried fruits, nuts, granola bars for kids to snack on. Again, fruits, grapes, those sorts of things are great items for kids to snack on. Snack cakes, potato chips, cookies, those sorts of things, probably best to leave those at home. And let's see, the last question that I have that came in is that what about protein bars and energy bars? I mentioned the protein shakes and briefly mentioned the energy bars. You can go to the store and you can find energy bars and you can find protein bars. If you look at the labels on the back of those, what you'll see is the protein bars are very high in protein. They're designed for someone who may be doing a lot of weight training, is trying to put on a lot of muscle mass. And so the feeling there is the more protein helps with the muscle mass. That's not what we want for a recovery snack or even a pre-match snack for a group of soccer players. What we want is the energy bars. If you look at the back of an energy bar, it'll have a high high carbohydrate content and less protein. Be a little bit careful. Some of the energy bars you'll see down at the bottom in the small print will have caffeine in them. Not many, but a few do. But those are the things we want. We want the energy bars with the high the high carbohydrate content before and after the matches, and again, leave the protein bars at home. So that's all I have for now in terms of questions and a little bit of presentation. Again, this will be archived. We'll keep this up on YouTube and provide links through the CalSouth website. I'm sure they'll leave those up there. I will post this also on my website, so you can certainly watch it again. You can offer, again, to those who didn't, if you have colleagues, other parents, players, more than welcome to let them watch so we can spread this around. And also, again, if you have any other questions, you can contact me through my webpage. It's linked to a Facebook site and also the Twitter site, and I will be certainly glad to try and ask your questions. But again, thanks again for joining in. We appreciate it. To the CalSouth Coaches Association, also thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to talk with the coaches and parents and players. And other than that, I will bid everyone a good afternoon. Thank you.